let's just go to the next item here, okay? For the general household items. So usually the big issue is a vehicle, okay? And many times that there will not be a contest that you owned a vehicle. So you may not need to find the the registration showing your ownership of a 2005 Mazda or whatever. Because the other party's gonna acknowledge, yeah, it's true, you had that. Nobody's gonna say you didn't have it.
Right. Right. Okay.
So that's not the issue. The issue is gonna be putting a value to it. Okay.
Okay.
And for vehicles, it's actually one of the tricks you can use is to go to your library and see if they have the Canada Red Book.
Yeah.
Okay, because the library actually usually I know the Toronto Reference Library, for example, goes way back into the 90s, even to the late 80s of Red Books, and you'll be able to put a value on this old vehicle at this old date. So if your date of marriage is January 1st, 2000, you can go and you have a 1995 car, you can get a Red Book that will tell you the value of that 1995 car on the January 2000 date of marriage. Okay, so that's cars. Where people really argue is over on this box is on the household goods or jewelry. Okay, and it's funny because for most lawyers we kind of try to avoid this fight, but for people going through the system, this is a it's very personal, right? The jewelry and the household goods. And the starting point, just remember, did it exist and valuing it are two separate questions. So if you can even just put some thought on how to prove it existed, that is a good starting point. Okay. And so for household goods and even for jewelry, I had a client very recently that she got her wedding pictures to show the different jewelry, just to show what existed. Okay. Now putting a value may be very difficult on these items, and many people will overestimate what kind of value these items may have. That's why lawyers don't really want to fight over these things. Okay, because we're not talking about replacement value. We're talking about what I call Kijiji value. All right, and how much can you sell a couch for on Kijiji realistically that's used, right? And for jewelry, we're not looking at the insurance value, we're looking at the fair market value, which is how much you can actually sell it for. So the starting point, again, is making a list and trying to evidence that something actually existed. If you're going to go down this route, putting a value, I don't have any good tricks other than to tell you that be conservative in how you put a value to something. Okay, so because there is a smell test as to whether you're being overachieving on how much. Everybody knows you want to maximize the value of your date of marriage, but that doesn't mean you're going to. Okay, and again, I haven't even discussed like getting receipts. Okay, it's very possible nowadays with email receipts that you could find old receipts in your email. That's an idea, but remember, we're not talking about that. Will prove ownership. It'll also prove the purchase price, but it won't tell you what the fair market was at the date of marriage. Separate question, right? Remember, Kijiji value, not the actual purchase value. Right. Okay. So many people probably want me to spend the most time on these boxes, and it's funny because the lawyers don't, and I don't either. But if you use what I just said as a methodology of making a list to prove, right, that something existed, and to see whether you have any evidence of something existing, you're halfway there. Okay, putting a value, that can be, we can talk about that, what the value is, but to show that something actually existed is probably more important.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
All right. So now let's talk about banks. So the problem with bank accounts is that that most banks are said to keep records for about 6 years,
Yeah.
right? So if you
Mhm.
think about it, how much information can you get about your own bank account online? Usually about 18 to 24 months, right? For
Yes,
most
that's right.
banks.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the next question is, how much can you get from the bank if you went to the branch?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a third question. How much can you get if you actually like call the 1-800 number and make a formal request
Yeah.
and pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
They might have microfiche.
Oh God.
I might be dating myself, but I've seen this where they
Yeah.
pull information, and we're not looking necessarily for the bank statements as much as we're looking for a printout, anything from a bank, because we presume, this is a question of evidence, that bank records are done in the course of business, and so they're
Right.
reliable. So if
Right.
you can get any information from a bank, that's reliable information,
Yeah.
more times than not. And so that's the starting point, is to go to the banking institution and ask,
Right.
okay, and see how far you can push it. Okay, so that's for bank accounts, and I'm just going to write bank account. Whoops. Here we go. Bank account. Okay, let's talk about some other accounts that are common. Okay, the next kind of bank account that's common, I would say, are TFSAs and RRSPs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, both of these, a trick that we use is to go online to your CRA My Account.
Okay.
Okay, and if you go under the TFSA tab or the RRSP tab, they actually have a list of contributions that you make each year and withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it could be a little complicated to read those statements because there's I don't want to get too much into it, but if you make pension contributions, that has its own little line item there. That's a little bit separate. It's adjusting the RSP numbers. But the point, though, is that if you can't find a bank statement for either your TFSA or RRSP, you can at least evidence the contributions that were made leading up to the date of marriage. Now, that doesn't account for growth or loss or general market, but at least you can prove, going back to that idea of proving that it existed, that's a good way to get your TFSAs and RSPs acknowledged as of date of marriage. Okay, so that's those two.
Okay.
The other items that you might have are investment accounts.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk about investment accounts, I'm also going to say this can also apply for investment properties. Okay.
Okay.
And if you don't have, again, if you don't have the bank accounts for these investment accounts, right? You don't actually have the bank accounts. One trick is to procure one way or the other your income tax returns for the years leading up to and including the year of marriage. Okay, and what do you gain from doing that? And I think I actually have a tax return local. Are you seeing
There we
it?
go. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it.
Okay. So this is a very recent tax return, but they generally look the same.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some line items here, such as taxable amount of dividends, interest and other investment income,
Right.
and capital gains,
Mm-hmm.
all of which represent some form of investment that is earning some form of income.
Mhm.
And so therefore you can extrapolate at least the ownership of the income of the property. Okay.
Mhm.
Same thing with rental income. If you have rental income, that might very well mean you have a rental property.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Right.
So that okay. Yeah.
And there is a schedule, which I believe I have here on this sample.
Right.
And I'm just, you don't have to know this, just know that this exists in life, right?
Mhm.
There's a capital gains and losses. It's Schedule 3
Mhm.
of the tax return,
Mhm.
and um, it has here year of acquisition.
Mhm.
So let's say the date of marriage is
Oh.
2000,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you have no evidence of an investment account. Let's call it just as an example, right?
Mhm.
Um, but in your 2005 tax return, which is
Mhm.
not date of marriage,
Mhm.
it shows that you disposed of an investment that you purchased in 1998. Well, therefore, it
Oh.
existed in 2000, right? Okay,
Yes. Wow, I see.
right? And
Yeah.
this column will show what you purchased it for. Now, 1998 purchase price is not going to help you for year 2000 date of marriage 100%, but it's going to get you on the board, right? Where you can start thinking about it, about the value. But we've now proven that it existed. Okay? I know that's a little advanced, but know that there are tricks here that when you don't have the piece of paper, we can start to try to find secondary pieces of paper. Well, so
Okay,
so
would this information still be available if people were filing their taxes online?
yeah, so that's a really good question.
Yeah.
As life goes on, the technology is changing, and Revenue Canada is trying to keep up.
Yeah.
I give them some credit, actually.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this information would still be available, and you call up Revenue Canada, you can actually ask for old tax returns.
Okay.
Okay. Like, in other words, they keep records of all this. If you
Oh,
can't
okay.
get it on CRA My Account, just
Yeah.
call them,
Ah,
because they
okay.
no, they keep records. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a
Sounds
good
good.
question, but
Yeah.
the underlying information is still needed when you're
Yeah.
filing, even if the technology is different.
Yeah. Okay, so continue. Sorry
Yeah,
about the
sure.
interruption.
So we're now up to that. We just did bank accounts,
Yeah.
and we're just moving right along. Just waiting for that. Okay. Okay, life and disability insurance at date of marriage. So the only life insurance that we really care about is whole life,
Oh,
um, which
oh,
is, I mean, sometimes universal, but I think whole life is the type that is going to retain value.
that's right. Yeah.
And I don't want to like have to go through every detail, but the
Hmm.
short answer is you can definitely ask your broker to find out this information the insurance companies keep, because there's also some tax issues with it. But
Mm.
they'll be able to tell you um, it's certainly how much it was worth at the beginning when it started. That's the least that they can give you. But they may even be able to give you point of time values. In other words, how much money was accrued as actual cash surrender value
Hmm. Hmm.
on a
Sure.
date. If you don't have it,
Hmm.
so again, proving that you have that policy, you can get a statement that will say, the current value as of valuation date, and it'll also say on the statement the date that it started. So you can already get that information easy to prove that it existed. From a value point, one cute way of estimating is to do a pro rata. In other words, if data separation is 2000
Hmm.
and the policy started in 1995 and it's 2023,
Hmm.
so you can do some math there. That's 28 years, right? And if the value is 28,000 today, just to make that up for simplicity, you can say, well, in year 5, which is the date of marriage, well, 5 out of 28 is 5.
Oh,
Right?
okay, got
You
it.
get
Yeah.
it? Like
Yeah,
you can do something like that,
yeah,
at least to estimate.
yeah.
It's not necessarily accurate, but it's better than nothing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's life insurance. Business interests, I wouldn't say are easy, but they're easier because there will be hopefully some financial statements that somebody has a minute book that keeps records, like the accountant or the bookkeeper, or the business lawyer, or you can ask Revenue Canada for the T2 tax returns, the corporate tax returns, which may actually have the what they call the jiffy, but it has the net worth, the balance sheet within the tax return. So that will be helpful, proving that it existed and also helping for value. Okay, it's not going to be perfect because it's book value, but it's at least as opposed to market value.
Mhm.
But you're at least starting somewhere
Mm.
for showing that it existed and the general values. Okay, so that's for
Mm.
business interests.
Mhm.
Money owed to you. The only thing I could say about money owed to you is that if it's accruing interest, then, I mean, hopefully you would have some kind of IOU note of some sort, right?
Mm.
But if you don't, if it was accruing interest, you ought to have been declaring that interest as income, and that would show up on your tax return,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
right? That we showed earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm skipping other property.
Mhm.
And then debts and other liabilities. So this one's a little tricky to prove an old debt. Okay. Certainly money owed to CRA, you can prove using your notices of assessment. That's good. That's a good starting point, and you can get old notice of assessment even online from your CRA My account.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm just thinking. So okay, so we were talking earlier about land. So if you have a mortgage, you can get the mortgage not necessarily the mortgage document, but the charge document that's on the registry system. If it's a traditional mortgage, right, where you have, let's say, a 5-year with a fixed interest rate, and it says the monthly amount, you can actually go online to any bank. They have an amortization calculator,
Mm. Oh,
right?
yeah. Okay.
And you can kind of recreate the payments that were due under that mortgage and can reconstruct it basically and say, well, if the mortgage started 95 and here's the rates and here's the monthly payment and it was paid on a monthly basis, not, like whatever it's all, you can plug in all those details. And then as of January 1st, 2000, this is what the likely balance was. So that's a good way of dealing with a fixed mortgage. It gets more complicated when it's a line of credit um, or if it's a floating rate.
Mhm.
That's tricky also, but not impossible. If it says 0.5 above the bank rate, whatever, you can technically go online and recreate that also.
Mm. Okay.
Good luck. That one's a little
Mhm.
trickier. But it is important to get those debts down. In other words, if you show an asset without a debt, that's going to hurt your credibility,
That's I see. I see. I
right?
see. Right.
The other debt, an interesting debt that people have that you can kind of reverse engineer is sometimes people take out loans that they deduct the interest as an investment
Mm.
an investment cost, And that too shows up on the tax return. If I pulled up the tax return, I could show you that line item, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But not many people do that formally. That's more of an professional investors.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Wow.
but
Okay.
but that would be a good example of how to prove the debt. Now that I'm thinking about it, with regards to a mortgage, if you have a rental property, you likely are deducting the mortgage interest, so that also can be helpful somewhat to reconstructing what the what the underlying debt was. Okay, so again, you're kind of acting like a private investigator trying to put this together if you don't have the papers otherwise. But anything that can prove that it existed, and then
Right.
whatever you can do to kind of pinpoint or provide a range of what the debt would likely have been at the time, do it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth compiling it. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing I have to say, just on this box, is that there are liabilities that apply also for valuation date that many people just don't know about. But when if you have a house, actually, the house is a good example, and the RSPs are a good example. If you have a house, so we know that the house is not worth 100 cents on the dollar because you have a mortgage on it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so really, we're looking at the equity of the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so there's an asset value, and then there's a liability. But there's another liability. It's kind of like a latent or quiet liability, which is you have to pay somebody to sell it,
Oh yeah. Right.
right? Real estate fees. And really, I think that's a video unto itself, right? I mentioned just a second ago RSPs. Well, RSPs are also not a dollar for dollar value because you have to pay tax on it when you withdraw it.
Right.
Okay, and the complication is that we're not expecting you to necessarily withdraw it today or on valuation date,
Yeah.
and that's where the complication comes. But the point of me bringing this up is that you're gonna have to include those liabilities for date of marriage as well. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important. You have to talk apples to apples when you're talking about valuation date and date of marriage. So if we're including it for valuation date, we're also including it for date of marriage, and so that will reduce your net worth, unfortunately, but it's something that needs to be included. Okay, so here we are now at part 6, and it's going to just summarize what we just discussed, right? Proving that you
Mm-hmm.
had the asset on the date of marriage and putting a value, and that's all that's involved here. And just remember that the matrimonial home. In fact, let me just quickly go back to sum up to the spreadsheet over here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, whoops. Let's start with number 1. So remember, you have to prove that you have the property and it existed on date of marriage. So that's important. Number 2, don't forget liabilities. Oh, I noted here student loans. Many people don't remember that they used to have student loans at date of marriage. So that's another debt that you should just be aware of. Also, people forget that they have credit card debt. And remember that the matrimonial home is not so straightforward. Okay, so if the matrimonial home is defined at date of separation, but if it existed that same address on date of marriage, then you're not going to get that benefit of that value, unfortunately. And the takeaways are all of this is yours to prove. If you don't prove it, the court would, the court and the law just say, sorry, either you prove it or you don't, right? And so
I
you
see.
don't have to be 100%. You don't have to have the piece of paper. You could even go on the stand and say, listen, here's my story of my jewelry,
Mm.
right? And if you give a good story, that could be good enough. I just wanted you to say that
Wow.
out loud, right?
That's
But you,
interesting.
but you,
Wow.
but you don't want to get to that point. You want to do as much as you can before you get to that point,
Right.
right? And
Right.
proving something. Don't forget debts, and don't get confused about the matrimonial home issue. Okay, so those are the 3 takeaways on date of marriage. Everything's a journey, but this one, just like the exclusions, it's worth the journey, because for every dollar that you can prove existed on date of marriage is 50 cents less that you have to pay on the equalization.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of information today. Thank you so much, Shmuel, for being our guest today. And thank you to everyone for watching. If you found these videos helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot to us. And we'll see you the next time. Bye. Okay.